Good morning, everyone. Today I will be talking about the subject of bearing burdens. I'll be using some notes from a fellow named Stephen Shepherd from Sermon Central, and he had some really good points, so I'll be using some of those today. Do we as followers of Christ have any responsibility to helping others in bearing their burdens? Do we need to take time out of our schedules or make time to help others in their time of need? What does the phrase mean, to bear one another's burdens? After all, don't we have enough of our own? And are you telling me that we need to help carry some of the other burdens that others are carrying? Let's look what Paul tells us in the book of Galatians 6, 1-5. Paul writes, "Brothers and sisters, if somebody is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one of you should test their own actions, and then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else." In verse 5 he goes on to say, "For each one of you should carry your own load," or carry their own load. Life is full of problems, twists, and things that happen that don't always go as planned. A new airline company was disturbed over a high percentage of accidents caused by human error. So they decided to completely automate an airplane. As people sat down in their seats, the intercom came on, and the PA came on and said, "It may interest you to know that you are traveling in the world's first completely automated and computerized plane. Now just sit back and relax, because nothing can go wrong, go wrong, go wrong, go wrong, go wrong," as the last part stuck on going wrong for a long time. Needless to say, many of those people probably had a little bit of extra anxiety, wondering if there was any other bugs in that automated plane. We know, brethren, that one thing is certain in life: things do go wrong and will go wrong. It's a fact of life. And it seems that some people have a lot of things going wrong. We've heard some have used the expression in their life that says basically, life sucks. Their view is whatever can go wrong will go wrong. Brethren, bad things can happen to good people. Bad things to happen to Christians also. Paul writes in Romans 8:18. He says, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed to us." Paul talks about the suffering of this present life. They are part of life. Many times we have to suffer in this life, whether it's health-related issues, loss of a loved one, loss of job, financial crises. We may have to suffer physically, emotionally, mentally, or financially, and especially in COVID, many people have gone through a lot mentally. A college boy said to his mother one day, "I've decided that I want to be a political science major. I want to clean up the mess in this world." "That's very nice," said his mother. "You can go upstairs and start with your room." For some people, a part of their suffering deals with maybe their own children. It may be children who have walked away from the faith. It may be children that don't care to want a relationship anymore with their parents. It may be children that have gotten into the wrong peer group and gotten involved with drugs, alcohol, sex, and crime. There's an illustration of a school teacher sent a note home to the parents one day, the first day of school. And she said, "If you promise not to believe everything your child says happens at school, I promise not to believe everything your child says that happens at home." You know, sometimes children catch it from all angles. They get burdened too, not just us adults. And our suffering as adults can come from many different ways. Many times it is the bad choices we make in life that have a serious outcome in our lives. I remember growing up in the prairies, and I had a very good friend of mine. I went to college, and I heard later that he was... Anyway, what happened, he went to a bar with a friend of his. And as they were having a drink together, a drunk man came up and started picking on his friend, who was a little guy. Well, eventually my friend said, "Stop picking on him, he's half your size," and the drunk turned on him and started hitting him, and my friend slugged him one time, and the man fell over, hit his head on the back of the concrete, and died. So suddenly here's an innocent man defending his friend, and he is now guilty of manslaughter. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Things happen in life. Remember the story of Job. Satan appeared before God and asked God if he could put Job to the test. God allowed that to happen. And sometimes God allows things to happen in our lives to test our resolve, to test our mettle, to see how we're going to respond. Satan likes to cause trouble in the lives of Christians today because he knows his days are numbered, and he won't be able to do that much longer. We all suffer in our life. Sometimes it's because of others. You've heard stories about some drunk driving down the street, he hits some person and kills them. Totally innocent people are hurt and killed by somebody else. Marriages crumble because the spouse is an alcoholic, and it just destroys marriages. That's suffering because of somebody else's sin. So brethren, what does it mean when the Bible says we need to carry our own burdens? And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit more today about. For life can be rough. We may experience rotten or broken marriages, problem or prodigal children, painful or abusive parents, bad working conditions, financial hardships, poor or failing health, boredom, depression, loneliness. The list is endless. It can go on and on. The point is, what can we do about our suffering? How can we endure it? We need help, and where do we get it? Today I want to share 3 different areas in our lives where we can get help in the midst of our burdens. The 3 points are help from within, help from without, and help from above. I'd like to talk about the first point, help from within. Paul writes in Galatians 6:5, he says, "For each of you should carry your own load." Didn't say for others to carry it here. He says there's times we have to carry our own burden. The idea of Galatians 6:1-5 of other people carrying it is expressed differently in verse 5. It's an illustration of a man who was in a supermarket pushing a shopping cart, which contained, besides groceries, a screaming baby boy. As the man proceeded down the aisles, he kept saying, "Keep calm, George. Don't get excited, George. Don't yell, George." A lady watched with great admiration and finally spoke up, "You are certainly to be commended for your patience in trying to quiet little George." "Lady," he said, "I am George." You know, raising children can sometimes have its burdens, but those are the tasks that God has called us to do, to fulfill. You know, our parenting isn't always easy, and many times our parents can't help us. They can give us advice and maybe babysit occasionally, but we have to bear that burden ourselves and carry it. And I know many times you see mothers and fathers who are feeling sick, tired, discouraged, but they still have to go on in life as if everything is fine, and we have to be there for our children. The same is true for many things in life. Our work, we may get help from our work, but overall it's a burden we have to bear. Some help may come from our brains or perhaps our perseverance. There's an illustration a number of years ago of Nike Shoe Company. They produced some great commercials that were out. One, for example, about 10 years ago involved a runner, and it was a commercial for the running shoes. An English runner, Priscilla Welch, was 42 years old and had just won the New York Marathon, which was a pretty big accomplishment for a 42-year-old woman. In the commercial, Priscilla was shown running up a hill and some city sidewalk. While running, she said, "A few years ago, I would have had trouble walking up this hill. I smoked, I drank, I was fat, and I didn't have a lick of exercise in my life. So I started jogging." And who says you can't run away from your problems? At the end of the commercial, a sign appeared on the screen with these famous words, "Just do it. Just do it." There are times, brethren, when we have to just suck it up and just do it. We can't lean on anybody else at those times, but we have to roll up our sleeves and do the work. Lou Gehring, some of you probably know who he was. He was a baseball player for the New York Yankees. He played 15 years at first base. He played 2,130 consecutive games. He'd been called the Iron Man of baseball. For good reason. After he retired, they x-rayed both his hands and found that every finger had been broken at least one time. Yet he never missed a game. He played those games with broken fingers, without complaining, and kept going on. He just did it. He bore his own burdens. There's another person that I'd like to talk about a number of years ago. It was a 27-year-old man, Lance Armstrong. He did some wonderful things. He made some poor choices later in his life where he took substance or drugs to help him in his run, in his cycling. But he won the cycling world's most famous event, the 3-week 2,700-mile Tour de France. That's going 2,700 miles on a bike in 3 weeks. But what makes his win even more impressive is the fact that he did it after a 3-year bout with cancer. In 1996, he was diagnosed with testicular cancer. By the fall, he was not racing his bike. He was trying to survive his cancer, which had spread to his abdomen, his lungs, and his brain. He had 2 operations, including brain surgery. He endured 12 weeks of chemotherapy. With such a burden, who could believe that he would ever ride again? Yet he did. He believed in something, either himself or the aspect of just doing it. He rode 30 to 50 miles every day between his chemotherapy sessions. He did everything he could to regain his health and his strength, with the idea of becoming a winning cyclist again. And he did, and he succeeded. Nike Shoe Company has run a series of ads making the point that Lance is the first dead man to win the Tour de France. Brethren, Lance Armstrong bore his own burden. And there are times that we have to bear our own burden in the same way. We may not feel like it, but we still have to do it. As one employer said, I'd sooner have people who crawl in sick rather than those who call in sick. So do we want to call in sick all the time to work if we have a little sniffle? Or do we crawl into work and we just deal with it? There's another lady that you've probably heard, Fanny Crosby. She was blind from birth. It would have been easy for her to just say, I can't do anything. God, you let this happen to me and I can't do anything. Yet she wrote over 1,000 hymns. And she couldn't see. She was blind. She didn't give in to her condition or circumstance. She just did it. Sometimes we have to ignore the pain, the hurt, the feelings, and bear our own burdens. Notice the words of David in Psalm 139:14. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. And brethren, I really believe that, when the going gets tough, sometimes we underestimate what we can achieve and do when we just do it. Because we are God's creation. We can endure more than we think. So, the first point is sometimes we have to look for help from within and just do it. The second point in bearing our own burdens is we need help from without. It says in Galatians 6:2, to bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Brethren, Christians should be in the business of helping one another, bearing one another's burdens. But some Christians are more critical than they are caring. They are more of a hindrance than a help. Galatians 6:1 says, brothers and sisters, if somebody is caught in a sin, you should live by the Spirit and should go and gossip about it to everybody in the church. No, it doesn't say that. It says you should restore that person gently. We as Christians are supposed to be in the healing business, the restoring business, the putting back together, and the bearing of burdens business. That's what God has called us to do. Everybody makes mistakes. Sometimes they're more serious. When a fellow Christians make mistakes or is found in sin, we have a job to respond to them and to reach out and help them. When somebody does something wrong, don't gossip, but help them, encourage them. Don't try to cure the cancer. Sometimes these people don't cure the cancer, they just spread the disease. Legalistic Christians are not interested in helping or healing the hurting people, only in hammering them. There's a story of a lady who lived in one church area. She was Mildred, the church gossip, the self-appointed monitor of church morals. She kept sticking her nose into other people's business. Several members did not approve of her extracurricular activities, but feared her enough to maintain their silence, unless she turned her wrath on them. Well, she made a mistake, however, one day when she accused Frank, a new member, of being an alcoholic, after she saw his old pickup parked in front of the town's only bar one afternoon. She emphatically told Frank and many others standing around that everybody there knew that he was an alcoholic and he was busy drinking all day long. Frank, however, was a man of few words. He stared at her for a moment, just turned and walked away. He didn't explain anything. He didn't deny or defend anything. He said nothing. Later that evening, Frank quietly parked his pickup truck in front of Mildred's house and left it there all night long. You gotta love Frank. I'm sure the stories are flying the next day, and I'm sure Mildred was quite quiet. As believers, sometimes it's too easy for us to talk or gossip about other people's faults. And when we do, we form wrong conclusions and we make wrong judgments. And when we do that, we sin. None of us has the right to criticize, condemn, or judge others. It says in James 4:11-12, "Brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you are not keeping it, but sitting in judgment. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor?" So brethren, instead of judging and criticizing one another, we should be in the business of blessing one another, restoring, healing, forgiving, and bearing others' burdens. It says in Matthew 5:7, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." Do we really believe that? It says in Galatians 6:2, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." Other translations put it that we are to bear one another's burdens. Help others with the loads that they are carrying. It says in 1 Thessalonians 5:14, "And we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who are idle and disruptive, encourage the disheartened, help the weak, be patient with everybody." Notice the words: we are admonished to encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with everyone. All of us will struggle at times, and that's when we need our fellow believers to help us. In the United States, there was a judge named Lee Shapiro. He was a retired judge. His colleagues called him the hugging judge, as opposed to the hanging judge. Judge Shapiro had a bumper sticker on his car which read, "Don't bug me, but please hug me." Some years later, he created the Hugger Kit, and he gave a heart for every hug. And so one day he decided to go out on the streets of San Francisco. First, he stopped a woman walking by on the street, and he said, "Hi, I'm Lee Shapiro, the hugging judge. I'm giving out these hearts in exchange for a hug." "Sure," she replied, and she gave him a big hug. Next, he saw a meter maid and offered her a heart for a hug. And again, he got another hug. A TV commentator standing by says, "Look, here comes a bus." It was a San Francisco bus driver, which are often the toughest, crabbiest, and meanest drivers around. "Let's see if you can get a hug from him," said a reporter. So when the bus pulled over the curb, he said, "Hi, I'm Lee Shapiro, the hugging judge. Yours has to be one of the most stressful, hardest jobs. I'm offering hugs to people today to lighten the load. Would you like one?" The big 6'2", 230-pound bus driver stepped off the bus, and he gave him a big hug. He said, "Sure, why not?" It's been said that everybody needs 4 hugs a day just for survival. Anything less, you won't survive, and a lot of people aren't surviving. Most of us need 8 hugs a day for maintenance, and 12 hugs a day for growth. So let's remember that, let's give some of those hugs to other people. It's been said that hugging is healthy. It improves the immune system, makes us more patient, reduces stress and anxiety, releases oxytocin, which fills us with happiness, conveys many emotions without even saying a word. It balances the nervous system. It offers a strong display of love and support. It induces sleep, so don't give any hugs until the end of the sermon. It's invigorating, rejuvenating, and there's really no side effects of a hug. So we need to be a hugger, a healer, and a burden bearer. So that's the second point, that we need to help one another instead of judge one another. The third point in the scriptures about bearing burdens is we need to look for help from above. What does it say in Psalms 55:22? It says, "Cast your cares on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken." We are asked here to cast our burdens on the Lord. And He wants us to cast them on Him. And He won't leave us by ourselves there to deal with it. In Matthew writes in 11:28, "Come to me, all who are weary, burdened," He says, "and I will give you rest." Do we do that? Are we going to God when we're under a lot of stress and burdens in our lives? Are we doing that? I think many of us sometimes don't. We want to carry those burdens around. And Jesus didn't say, I might give you rest. He says, I will give you rest. In 1 Peter 5:7, Peter says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. We have to cast all the cares on him. He wants to carry them for us. And as Hebrews in 4:16 tells us, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so we may receive mercy and find grace and help in our time of need. Generally, there comes a time in nearly every person's life where they find they must look up to God for help for their burdens. A person may be able to sometimes deal with it themselves or get help from other people, but there's times we really need God's intervention in our lives. Abraham Lincoln once said, I've been driven many times to my knees by the overwhelming conviction that I have nowhere else to go. Have we been there? Have we done that? Got down on our knees and asked God to help us through the problems that we're going through. He wants to help us. But many times we don't go to God, and we just save that for when it's extreme emergencies. We think, I don't need God at other times. We treat God like he is some sort of a spare tire to be used only in times of trouble. For example, at one church there were 3 men. They were older men that didn't like to cook. So they would regularly attend a restaurant in town. They went to that restaurant every day. And every day they were given the same quick, great service. Why? Because they were regular, faithful customers at the restaurant. Could it be the same with the Lord? Could it be that if we were regular, faithful customers in prayer, he'd be quicker to hear our prayers than those times when we come to him only in desperation? I like what a little girl said. I go to church every Sunday so that when I'm old and they carry me out in a coffin, the Lord won't ask, who is it? Who is that? We want God to know us. We want a relationship with him. We want to commune with him. We read in 1 Peter 3:12, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Do we come regularly to the Father in prayer? Does he know us? Are his ears attentive to our every need in prayer? A boy and his father were walking together on a familiar path. As they made a sharp turn on a narrow section of the path, they came across a big rock blocking the path. The little boy asked the father, do you think I can move it? His dad said, why, of course, if you use all your strength, I'm sure you can move it. So the little boy, pumped up his muscles a little and walked toward the rock and approached it to get the best angle and began pushing and grunting with all his might. He summoned all the strength he had and he pushed and pushed, but to no avail. Finally, in desperation, he said, you were wrong, Dad. I just can't do it. His dad looked at him in the eyes and smiled. No, son, you haven't used all your strength yet. I'm right here and you haven't asked me to help. Isn't that how God is? He's right there. But many times we grunt and groan and try to deal with our problems rather than going to him for help. As it says in Matthew 7:7-11, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, that door will be opened. Are we going to God in all times and asking, knocking at his door, seeking and asking him for help? He wants us to, not just when we're at an extreme difficult situation in our life only. Goes on in that verse, it says, which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? Brethren, in the midst of all our heartaches and burdens, our Father in heaven is saying, I'm right here. Have you tried asking? Have you tried seeking? Have you come to knock at my door for help? He wants us to. All you have to do is ask. James 4 tells us that we do not have because we do not ask, or we ask for the wrong reasons. We need to ask and talk to God when we, not just in our difficult times, but at all times, and maintain that relationship with Him. We read in Psalms 46 verse 1. It says, God is our refuge and strength in ever-present help in trouble. In conclusion, I'd like to talk about a lady who attended a Bible study, and she was always blessed. She said, I'm always blessed by reading the words of the Bible. She said, every time I open it, I come across these words, and it came to pass. And when I'm upset by troubles in my life, I go to the Bible and I find those same words. It says, and it came to pass. And I say, blessed be the Lord. He didn't say it came to stay. He said it came to pass. Brethren, our burdens in life didn't come to stay with us forever. They won't stay. This too shall pass. They have come, but they will pass. Remember these 3 points that I talked about today. When you're struggling with the burdens of life, look to the inner strength within you that God has made you who you are. Look for the strength that comes from other people around you. And probably the most important one is look to God, who is there for you. Let's give our lives to Him and allow Him to be the Lord of our life. Why not make it now instead of waiting for a day when you're going through difficult times? And P.S., don't forget to bring your burdens and give them to Him also. So I'd like to just close in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we come before you at this time. Thank you, Father, for our life on this earth. As you know, when your Son came to the earth, it wasn't all easy. Jesus dealt with some terrible difficulties and trials and problems too. And Father, you know exactly what we're going through in our lives. And help us when we go through difficulties, whether it's emotional, mentally, physically, spiritually. Help us to come to you because you're there and you want to help us. We have friends around us, believers that are there to help us also. And you give us the strength and the courage sometimes that we didn't even know we had. So Father, help us to come to you at all times and to look to you and bring our burdens before you and allow you to change our life for the better. We ask all of this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.